Now the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghty of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today as usual. First, though, Jim, we need to point out that the Democrats have selected Philadelphia for the site of their 2016 Democratic National Convention, and we wish them all the luck of the Philadelphia 76ers being in their home arena. Hope the mojo rubs off on them next year.
Yeah, that's an excellent choice. Look, let's face it, their tactics and campaigns have always kind of reminded us of the Flyers. Lots of, a bunch of thugs out there, a whole bunch of really rough guys out there. It's a fairly nice city. I actually got married in Philadelphia. Nice enough people, good cheesesteaks. It's not a bad choice. I had really been hoping for hipster central over in Brooklyn. Okay. But the fact that apparently the cops and the mayor hate each other may have been a little problematic for Democrats. So good for you, Philadelphia. I guess we'll be seeing you in 2016.
All right, on to the real good martini today. Yesterday, the House of Representatives passed the Senate version, essentially, of the Keystone XL pipeline bill, meaning there's a unified version between the House and Senate. It's a done deal. It hasn't been sent to the president yet. They may send it after the President's Day recess here. They don't have enough votes in either chamber at this point, it appears, Jim, to override an expected presidential veto. But the good news is it still puts the president in a terrible position. He's either got to wobble on his promise to veto it, or he's going to take a huge public relations hit, because this is something about 70% of the American people think would not only be good for energy independence, but for creating good, solid American jobs.
Obama's made pretty clear from his statements that he's going to veto it. There's a little argument to be made that the political environment for this isn't as advantageous for Republicans as it could be because gas prices have gone down. But look, again, the polling on this is pretty darn clear. The Republicans said they were going to do it, and they did it. It's only mid-February, and already they're sending a popular piece of legislation to the president's desk. When you don't control the White House, but you do control the Congress, these are your options. You send stuff to the president that people like, that is popular, you get stuff done the public wants to see done, and you make that president either acquiesce and agree to the stuff or veto it. I think we know how this president's going to do, and he may think that he's fighting the good fight and standing up, et cetera, et cetera. I think he's actually doing some serious damage to what you and I think is already a pretty appalling legacy, but what is a mixed legacy at best, that he's going to spend the last 2 years of his presidency being an obstructionist.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see if he makes the same argument again, that the problem with the jobs with the Keystone Pipeline is that they're temporary construction jobs. So we need to be pumping all this into roads and bridges, because those
are permanent. Now, in president's defense, if you ever had to drive on highways where they're doing construction, it does seem like it takes forever. It does seem like, that union labor, takes its time. So understandable you might have that confusion. But no, you can't, on the one hand, scream about the need for infrastructure spending and then turn around and say, yeah, but not the pipeline. That's the wrong kind of infrastructure.
All right, on to the Bad Martini now, and we go to the Middle East, which is not a rarity in the Bad Martini, over to Yemen. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago and the destabilization there, and what is essentially a coup. Some elements of the government remain in place, but yesterday the U.S. hastily evacuated our remaining diplomatic staff. We left some vehicles there that some of the rebels were driving around. We dismantled some of our crew weapons and our larger weapons there. Normally, we wouldn't really care if a bunch of Iranian-backed radicals decided to clash with a bunch of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula people. That seems like a good use of their time from our perspective. But the way we kind of beat this humiliating retreat sends, once again, a terrible message to the region and the world.
Two or three things that are kind of jumping out about this. One, I'm going to take you back to September when Obama is talking about his effort against ISIS, and he says, "This strategy of taking out terrorists who threaten us while supporting partners on the front lines is one we have successfully pursued in Yemen and Somalia for years." And everybody kind of, did spit takes in the counterterrorism world who was kind of surprised to see the president claiming Yemen is a success story. Yemen had been tottering for a good long while. And the interesting thing was hearing occasional reports about whether the embassy should be closed and whether U.S. diplomatic personnel were in danger there. the possibility of a Benghazi or a Tehran-style situation was not unthinkable. Well, now we've got the embassy shut down, which I guess is good news, but we have effectively left Yemen. I don't understand how you can cite it as a success story when we're forced to evacuate. And al-Qaeda in Yemen has been one of the more, active and vocal and dangerous groups out there. Occasionally you'll see the folks in the counterterrorism world saying that this is a, fairly significant problem. Jim Sciutto was saying that, look, well, first of all, keep in mind, we left Libya, right? I mean, we now have no diplomatic personnel on the ground in Libya, no major significant counterterrorism presence in Libya other than whatever intelligence assets we have there. We've got nobody in Syria. These are all places where terrorism and al-Qaeda and ISIS and these dangerous Islamist groups are breeding and propagating and recruiting and being active. We are in retreat on this, and the administration is probably going to spend a day or two, mumbling that, no, this is going fine. And then they'll probably go back, Obama will go back to talking about the minimum wage or something else that he wants to talk about, even though, Islamists now have another nesting ground where they're effectively not threatened by the United States or any of its allies anymore.
Oh, that's a good point. And, of course, Yemen is right at that very narrow entrance to the other side of the Red Sea. So if they get any designs on disrupting commerce over there, that could be a huge problem for us and potentially many other countries as well. But we'll see which radicals get control. That's always a fun process.
Is it the bad ones or the really bad ones? Yeah.
Exactly. All right, on to the Crazy Martini now, and staying in foreign affairs. This is from USA Today. The leaders of Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany on Thursday announced a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine following marathon talks in the Belarusian capital of Minsk. Russia's President Vladimir Putin on Thursday said the agreement envisages the ceasefire starting Sunday, a special status for rebel regions, provisions on border controls, and humanitarian issues. But Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said the talks did not include any agreement on autonomy or federalization for eastern Ukraine, a longtime demand of Russia. Jim, a number of things here. We've definitely heard about these ceasefires before, and the idea that Putin's kind of playing the mediator here doesn't pass the laugh test.
Well, if Putin says it's cool, hey, what do we got to worry about, right? I would not pretend to be an expert on Russia. There are people who have spent their lives, we used to call them Kremlinologists, who did their best to understand, what was really going on inside the Kremlin and things like that. But look, there's a fairly simple explanation of why Putin does what he does. And some people say, oh, is he crazy? There was that theory going around that he was some sort of mental illness or something. But he wants power and control. He wanted Crimea, so he went out and got Crimea. He wants a bigger chunk of Ukraine, so he's going to go out and get Ukraine. He wants Eastern Europe's members of NATO to feel nervous and wonder if NATO is really going to back them if it ever came to a fight. He wants Eastern Europe back in his orbit. He wants them all kind of bowing and scraping and, when he says jump, for basically everybody in Eastern Europe to ask how high. I'm surprised at how hard allegedly smart foreign policy people find this to understand. That what does this guy want? Power, influence, control. This is, the yearning for power that, let's face it, that corner of the world isn't exactly unfamiliar with in you look over the history of the 20th century. So the idea that this, and so he comes, no, don't worry, it's fine. We're going to negotiate. It's all cool. Those guys who I totally don't control at all now won't be fighting you because of the deal I reached. I mean, just that contradiction there is an issue. And then you throw in this other kind of aspect of just the idea that, look, it's Putin. How much can you trust him? Reagan had the trust but verify slogan with the Soviet Union. It'd be nice to see the U.S. trying to approach this. I realize our allies aren't particularly eager to kind of, engage in too much brinksmanship here. But this basically, whether we realize it or not, it looks like we're in a position where we're basically saying, you can have as much of Ukraine as you want, and we'll take whatever's left. As our greatly intimidated and not really of significance ally.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. But hey, it's cool. Peace in our time.
Glad that reset button worked.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah.
Wow. All right, Jim. On that happy note, we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Week is almost over, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and please join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.